All right, Mr. Chair, ready when you are.
Good evening. It is 6:30, Wednesday, January 21st, 2025, and I call this meeting of the Lakewood Planning Commission to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Philip Combs,
Present.
Robert Estrada, Christian Flores,
Here.
Mark Hare,
Here.
Lynn Larson,
Here.
Jim Merritt,
Here.
Sharon Wallace.
Here.
You have quorum.
Thank you. You all please join me, if you so desire, in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I trust everybody's had an opportunity to review the minutes from January the 7th. Are there any questions or updates? Seeing none, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Combs and seconded by Mr. Merritt that we approve the meeting minutes of January 7th, 2026. Please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries. The minutes are approved. Madam Clerk, are there any agenda updates?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right. I'll open the public comment for the evening. We have nobody signed up for in-person comment at this time. However, just a reminder for, first of all, thank you for all that have shown up here in person today. If you are in the room and did not sign up for public comment, we'll be given an opportunity here in just a moment to approach the podium. For those of you joining us virtually or watching at home or after this date on the live stream, you may join us virtually online or by phone at cityoflakewood-us.zoom.us/j/8517-9454-840. You may also join us by phone at 253-215-8782 and enter meeting ID 8517-9454-840. Public comment or testimony on public hearing are accepted by mail, email, or in-person or virtual attendance. Mailed comments to Karen Devereaux, Planning Commission Clerk, 6000 Main Street Southwest, Lakewood, Washington, 98499, or email kdevereaux@cityoflakewood.us. Comments received by noon on the day of the meeting will be provided to the commission electronically. For in-person and virtual comments, each person will have 3 minutes. Attendees are allowed to speak during public comment or public hearings only. Those attending in person will be called on by the clerk. Those attending via Zoom should use the raise hand function to indicate that they wish to speak. Once the chair or the clerk calls your name and recognizes you, you will be unmuted. First, state your name and city of residence, and then provide your testimony. This evening, is there anybody in the room who would like to provide public comment that is not signed up? Please go ahead and approach the podium. You're not a journalist.
Yeah, it's usually.
My name is John Burns. I'm a resident of Lakewood, Washington. I wanted, as many of you know, I am an advocate for keeping the public access to the street ends that abut the lakes of Lakewood open to the public. I think it's a good idea to have extra room for parks, extra room for people to come down and enjoy the water, however they do that, be it wading, fishing, kayaking. And I think it's a travesty that any of these would ever be sold to the adjoining property owners for any reason, okay? Any reason whatsoever. I think it's important to keep these valuable properties within the city for the public use. And once again, anybody who has adjoining property. Well, they already got a little slice of the pie. And let's let the public have another slice. So this policy that is in front of you with the Lakewood Municipal Code, chapters 12, deal with how encroachments are enforced. Okay, so if someone were to take some land and have some of that public land, what city tools the city has to be able to enforce those. And the tools under the new policy that's in front of you here, although it didn't say that, have been changed drastically and reduces the city's capability to cite encroachers, and essentially is written, and that has been confirmed by others in staff, it's written to give them a pass. So any encroachments that they have, they're grandfathered in those encroachments. The city's lost its ability to enforce those encroachments, to write someone up. They've lost the ability to levy fines. So the only ability now that exists is if the new landowner encroaches, adds to the encroachments. That's all. That is a policy that is not a good thing. Okay, if you bought a section of land and you didn't have it surveyed, and yet it holds, 22 feet of public property behind your fence, and you want to keep that, well, when you decriminalize that kind of behavior, where someone has something that doesn't belong to them, then when you allow that as a city or even a member up here, those things to go unchallenged, then you're part of the problem, not part of the solution, because people who take things that isn't theirs and keeps them when they know they're not yours, okay, are part of the problem and not part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Is there any other member of the public present that would like to speak?
Hello? Is that good? Okay. My name is Cameron Coppage Pope. I'm a resident of Lakewood, Washington. I was born and raised in Lakewood, Washington. I'm also speaking to the Lake End easement issue there. We went through this before. I don't have too much to say about it, honestly. I think any subtle attempt to legally circumnavigate or negate the gains that we made in regard to the Lake End easements is, kind of unethical, actually severely unethical. And then as a fisherman and someone who pays a Washington State fishing license fee annually, I think there's a huge problem there regarding access and taking away any access. Right now, all over the United States, there are huge public land battles, attempts to sell off public land and generally reduce access to public land and waterways. And I would hope that the city of Lakewood would be bold in its a commitment to public access to public waterways and public land, and continue to enforce that policy, especially in a city like Lakewood that's incredibly diverse in more ways than one when it comes to the demographics of the people that live here, whether that's ethnically or socioeconomically. So I would hope that our public waterways are equally as diverse in the type of access that we have. There's a waterfront park, which is great if you have a really big boat and if you can afford a really big boat. And when we went through this battle the first time, I was hearing a lot of people say things like, well, from the lake, we can't even see that easement. Well, that's correct that you cannot see it from a 20-foot boat. But for people who walk down there, for kids who can't drive, for people without cars, single mothers pushing strollers, you can definitely see the easement because you can get down there. So I think as far as just keeping equity in mind as well, I would hope that the city would be bold in its push to protect public access as far as these lake ends go. Because I think it would just be largely out of step with public sentiment as far as access to public land and public waterways go. There's also the question of corner crossing, which in the United States, land is on a grid pattern. There's recently rulings at some higher courts in the United States as far as accessing public land and waterways going from public to public. So regardless of if the easement is even vacated, there's a question of whether or not people would even still be able to access the water from that
Your
point.
time has elapsed, sir.
So thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public present this evening that would like to speak? All right. Madam Clerk, we'll turn to the digital viewers or virtual viewers, if you will. Is there anybody present online that would like to speak?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right. I will declare this public comment period closed. There is no public hearing scheduled for this evening. We'll move on to unfinished business. Action of the evening on Resolution 2026-02, Lakewood Municipal Code Title 12, Public Works, and Lakewood Engineering Services Manual Update. Ms. Spear.
Thank you. And I'm going to turn it right over to Assistant Public and Planning and Public Works Director Angie Silva to address this issue for the commission.
Thank you, Tiffany, Mr. Chair, as well as Planning Commissioners. This is a follow-up from your January 7th public hearing on proposed amendments to the Lakewoods Engineering Standards Manual and several titles within the Lakewood Municipal Code. Again, this is focused on engineering standards. We also appreciate the time that folks came to provide public testimony as it relates to this. I have no formal presentation scheduled for this tonight, so really want to open it up and ask if the Planning Commission has any questions for us as it relates to the proposal before you and any suggested amendments. Also here with me is Department Director Jeff Remack behind me, as well as the City Engineer Weston Ott to assist with technical engineering questions if you may have them.
Mr. Estrada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Silva, twice now I've heard in public comments about an encroachment that is not going to be, how do they put it? An encroachment that is grandfathered in. They're in Title 12. Can you clarify that, please?
Certainly, and it's a great and fair question, as we all love our access to our marine as well as freshwater ways across the region, including within the city of Lakewood. The proposed amendments, if you recall, do three basic categories. We reorg, so we reorganize several sections into a consolidated, more user-friendly. There are substantive edits as well as housekeeping. As it relates to right-of-way use, so street ends are right-of-way easements that end in lake terminus. Those specifically in the proposed revisions to the activities as well as the enforcement from the department's perspective have not been weakened, they've been strengthened. It is still illegal for objects or activities to occur within the right-of-way without express permission from the city of Lakewood. The proposed code amendments also clarify the type of right-of-way permits that would be used in that section. In addition, the current code as well as the proposal addresses street vacations, the state authorized process in which a property owner can request to vacate a street end or a partial street end. That is a legislative decision that would go before the city council as it relates to that. There's a public hearing and public notice. Substantively, that code has not also changed in this proposal because it's following the minimum standards of state law. What is separate to all that in the legislative proposal before you is the real estate transaction and whether or not to sell off or vacate right-of-ways or street ends, which is not the proposal here. We're not vacating any right-of-way. In addition to what would be a capital parks project to develop those areas for future public enjoyment and access. Right now, Parks Capital is going through the permitting process to develop the Westlake Street End. There are plans to develop more. Both of those decisions to vacate the real estate transaction goes to City Council for a final decision. Whether we agree or not, there's plenty of public opportunity to comment on that when it is before city council. As it relates to the Parks Capital Project, that too has an ability through public comment, when that 6-year plan goes to city council, to provide comment on whether street ends should be part of that 6-year plan to develop and make improvements to, before city council makes that final decision. With that, I'm going to look at the gentleman behind me. Anything to add or what I missed?
I'm
And
not
Chris-
sure that it's clear to me, and maybe only to me. Again, the question is, if a property has been encroached upon, and at this time, does this new amendment allow that encroachment to remain? Or will it still be subject to be removed by the city?
There's no proposed action. What I mentioned is there's several different avenues for action: street vacation, real estate transaction. Further, what is complicating when it comes to encroachments is part of that review, the due diligence review on what is the appropriate path forward requires a survey. Oftentimes sometimes those encroachments were allowed through the permitting process under Pierce County to site their garage or driveway access or the retaining wall to their home. That information has to be factored in as part of whether that encroachment is retained or whether or not the city will work around that as part of a future public access design. The proposed amendment does not decide that whatsoever.
I guess I don't want us to get into a situation similar to Edgewater Park, when the encroachment was allowed to take place and then the city ended up taking action
Correct.
after the fact. I mean, if it's encroached now, they should be taken care of now, not later. That's my perspective.
Correct. Edgewater, the property adjacent to Edgewater is a good example of city deliberate action to acquire that parcel.
Thank you.
Mr. Combs?
Thank you for that. When I read this before, it made sense. I didn't see any issues with it. I still don't see any issues with this as it relates to the street ends. I know that it will come up at some point. It's not today, but I personally am good with that. I guess I would add, though, I do agree with the public comment. The street ends are something that we need to, manage and be wary of handing them out too freely or letting them go. And I don't think that's what's proposed. I don't think that's the case right now. And those would be case by case. The street ends are valuable, not just for us today, but really looking further down the road. And I think about Lakewood 20, 50 years from now, what are those street ends look like? And so retaining those for future access, future need. In the meantime, they may not be something super special, but we have them. And so I think when we do let them go, it needs to be strategic, it needs to be well thought through, it needs to be intentional, not just because the neighbor wants it. And I don't think that's the case here, but I'm just putting my 2 cents in while I've got it. And I appreciate it. I motion for approving it. I'm ready to approve it when I'm ready.
Basically, I was going to say something like it. I mean, the name of the city is Lakewood. Most of the people is thinking and visualizing, well, there is going to be access to the water. So once we reach that point, I think we're going to do something about those ends and do something about it in the future. Because I think about the same thing is in the future, in 20, 40, 50 years, I don't think it's going to be something good that people don't have access to the water or to the lakes when the name of the city is Lakewood, right? So we will work on something to take care of that situation.
Thank you. Dr. Wallace?
Okay, so just so I understand a little bit more clearly, then boy, mine is quite sensitive, I apologize.
I'm trying.
So what we are approving is that the street ends will not be you will, given away, or they will be maintained as is, and then they may be developed by Lakewood for the use of its citizens at some time in the future. Is that correct? So they will be preserved?
Well, it doesn't, so there's several processes in the code. So what the code says and what it is proposed to say, you cannot have objects or activities within the right of without city approval. That's not eroded. We strengthen our enforcement protocols to go to other areas in our Lakewood Municipal Code, specifically Title I, that talks about penalties and the process for stop work, et cetera. What the code also currently has and retains is street vacations. Tonight, we're not saying street vacations are not allowed. What tonight is, it's still in the proposal, it's just reorganized. That is a state law process, and that goes to city council. So to say that street ends will remain public forever, that's not a decision or something we can guarantee tonight. That is a future conversation with the city council, the public, as well as the property owners abutting those areas, whether through a street vacation, through a parks capital project to improve public access, or through a third option, the city formally acquires that residential property to expand public access.
Well, just for the record, I would like to encourage that we maintain as many of those access points to the water. I agree, and I think the people of Lakewood deserve as much access as possible to those, and we should retain everything possible. And maybe even though a little bit that's impossible, we should still retain, because right now there's very limited access, and it's something we should all share. Thank you.
Gentlemen, anything? Mr. Larson?
I don't think an amendment is necessary. It seems as though,
Sorry.
I didn't mean to do that.
No, it's just trying to make it.
It seems as though the city has adequate and appropriate systems in place for public use of the property as it inherited when it became a city. These encroachments, there probably are several of them around Stillicum Lake, were in place when Lakewood was in Pierce County. And we inherited a certain amount of that, and we agreed to let be what was there without requiring all of a sudden to have people remove homes or parts of them. And so to be equitable to the public as well, the rights of way exist. They have not perfect access, as one would prefer, to be able to drive and launch a boat, have a parking space and the whole nine. But Lakewood is a different tradition than that, especially around Lake Stillicum. And a good part of that could be said around American Lake as well. So I believe that we're okay. It's not broke, don't fix it.
Thank you. Please go ahead, Mr. Strada.
Ms. Silva, I attended the city council meeting last night, and the subject of 108th Street came up. So I went to our 12 series manual here to see if I could find something pertaining to. So 108th Street is considered a minor arterial, and there's various qualities or they go along with that particular. But from my perspective, when you increase the number from 5 to 20,000 to more, you make it a principal arterial, which 108th Street basically become now, since 112th is closed. So with that in mind, is there a mechanism of some sort to treat, even if it's only temporarily, and give that street more attention? We're talking about some sort of signal because of the school, because of the church. That was the primary issue there. We don't want to wait until the accident happens before we say, yeah, maybe we should have done something. And there's Mr. Jeff. Okay, Mr. Jeff, tell us about it, please.
Yeah, no, so we did hear the message that was delivered yesterday, and we do understand with Alliance coming in, you're looking at 300 more apartments that'll be coming in, a portion of the traffic that is going to head out and go down 108th. So we did speak with the city engineer this morning. We're already looking at designs to potentially go ahead and put in flashers or the potential for what we can move forward with for traffic calming associated with the school, because we are aware of that. So we're looking at the transportation traffic impact analysis that we got with Alliance to see what percentage of that was directed to go down 108th. That's a prediction that they look at, and what assessments we can really do to look at that. There is mechanisms when, a road goes ahead and gets enough traffic and it grows, then yes, it can change and it can become a higher classification of road. The difference when you look at that, though, is the higher classifications of road start having different standards, the width of the road frontages that come improved with it. And typically, to be honest, the larger the road, the faster the speed limit. So it's not about necessarily that it be moves from, a local road to an, minor artery, and it just keeps growing. It's about what can we do about the issue associated with the schools. So we would look at that. At the same time, it doesn't hit the thresholds that we have currently for true full redevelopment. When we look at those, it is based on safe routes to schools, depending on location to schools. When we go for federal grants, conditions of roads, amount of right-of-way that exists, and where it's prioritized in terms of impact or hotspot for accidents and things around the city. So we are actively looking at what we can do there. It will probably be a traffic calming that'll be not, it'd be more like signs, things of that nature, emphasis patrols, than it will be redesigning the road, because that takes more time in what we're looking at. And that would be a future planning object. That answers the question?
Yes, and I thank you very much for your quick response.
Yeah.
Less than 24 hours.
Yeah, no.
That's good.
We're actively looking at it. and
You
we
sure
are.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I have no more questions. Thank you.
Any other questions from any other commissioner? Seeing none, hearing none. Actually, I do have one, Madam Clerk. On the agenda, this action resolution is labeled 2026-02, and in our packet, it's labeled -01.
I'm sorry, that is an error. It should be 01.
Thank you. I'll just offer one thing and then I'll entertain a motion. It's very obvious that we have passionate members of our community throughout all the different areas and zones of Lakewood. And as it was mentioned here before, we are in fact called Lakewood. There are 14 lakes inside the city. And how to best utilize those spaces is a varied approach across the city. It is the city council's job to take all the information in and determine the best path forward. It is our perspective and purview to offer them a well-developed conversation to help them make deliberations. I think we are doing that. I think we're hearing some good comment here this evening, and we have had before. There is no doubt that there will be continued conversation about some of these topics. What we are doing here tonight is not changing the landscape of that discussion. I think that's important to note. And these issues are getting a light shined on them, and that is our obligation to the community. With that being said, I'll entertain a motion to approve Planning Commission Resolution 2026-01, unless there is any desired amendments at this time.
Could you repeat the resolution?
Yes, the resolution is Planning Commission Resolution 2026-01, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Lakewood, Washington, formalizing its recommendations regarding amendments to engineering development regulations, including the Engineering Standards Manual, Lakewood Municipal Code, Titles 12 and 13, and Chapters 18 Alpha 20, and forwarding those recommendations to the Lakewood City Council for consideration and action.
Second.
Been so moved by Commissioner Combs and seconded by Commissioner Larson. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Guys have it. Resolution is approved. All right. Ms. Spear, seems like we will begin talking about the Lakewood Natural Environment and Climate Change Program.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And let me open up the slide deck for that. Just a moment. All right, so yes, thank you. And this is actually something that came before those planning commissioners who were here last year. So I'm going to do a really quick reminder of what this program actually is. The Natural Environment and Climate Change, or NEC program, is something where we've incorporated into a single program with a single direction for staffing and work planning, both the city's own voluntary recently adopted tree canopy goal of 40% by 2050. Also, some of the other comprehensive plan policies that the city council has adopted in the latest comprehensive plan itself. But then it's also addressing the requirements under state law, House Bill 1181, which is related to climate change, climate resiliency, and greenhouse gas reduction. So it's all climate related, nature related, and some of it is voluntary by Lakewood's own proactive positions. Other of it is required. But again, because it's so correlated, we're incorporated this into a single program. So, excuse me, the idea here is with tree information, other data that's been collected over recent years, community input, and then information about the climate and priorities regarding climate change, that is what is the basis for the NEC program. And so you'll see this little logo, and you'll see it many times, but that is the point behind all of that, is it's trying to pull all of those things together. Beginning in 2021 and 2022, the city proactively adopted an energy and climate change element in the comprehensive plan, as well as a work plan that had almost 90 action items. Fast forward a couple years, there was the state law, again, that related to what the city now has to do between 2023 and 2029 related to climate change and resiliency planning. And then we had, over the last few years, a number of updates to our big comprehensive plan overall. Again, some of you were involved in that. And then we have also collected quite a bit of data, which will now inform this program going forward. What's happened already is last year, in the annual comprehensive plan update process, we verified as a city that our parks, our utilities, and our capital facilities elements all already comply with what's required under House Bill 1181. So we're able to check those action items off, what we need to do by 2029. This is where we are right now. And for the next 18 months, because it's already January of 2026, we're looking at really climate change, resiliency, land use, urban forestry, and then community involvement in all of this, because the city, of course, can't solve all of these problems itself. This is going to require the cooperation, interest, and support by private property owners. And then we also are looking at urban heat and how people and our environment that we want to live and work in can be more resilient for that as hotter days increase and the temperature on those days increases, as well as looking for how the municipal projects going forward, whether it be a construction of a building or a road improvement, what have you, when there are vegetation and tree plantings that have to occur, making sure that the right vegetation and trees are selected. So what we are doing is being able to take advantage of a second round of grant funding to help deal with this, first and foremost. That became available as of January of this year. We weren't expecting it, so we were able to expand the scope of work in a good way. But we also have existing American Rescue Plan Act dollars that were reserved for dealing with our urban forestry program. And we also have a tree fund where enforcement and other mitigation fees, which are collected by permit applicants and developers, are set aside for things to deal, again, with trees and public education about tree forestry in the city of Lakewood. So with the grant funding, with the ARPA dollars, and with the tree fund dollars, we are now, in addition to what we have to do under the state law, looking at also moving forward with some voluntary public involved efforts this year. We have memorandums of understanding almost executed with the Pierce Conservation District. We're going to be hosting at least one, if not two, tree sales or tree giveaways for members of the public, whether they are residential homeowners or whether they're a business owner, if they want to be picking up trees to plant on their properties. There will also be education about how to do that the right way. And then we're also supporting mini grants, so up to $4,000 to some property owners that also went through the Pierce Conservation District with their project to get approval based on certain criteria, including at least 50% of what they plant has to be native vegetation or trees. We also are looking to potentially partner with Tacoma Tree Foundation and some other groups as well in order to have the public pulled into this early on, because again, the city only owns so much property. The city only has so much control or authority over utilities, for instance. And of course, private property owners are subject to the law, but it's not up to the city to say exactly what you do all the time. So everybody has to be involved in order for this program to succeed. And ultimately, not only the state law complied with, but also the urban forestry helping to achieve that tree canopy goal that's in our comprehensive plan. So again, in the next 18 months, the focus will be on establishing the public outreach, education, and opportunities to participate. There will be the urban forestry program stood up and the short, meaning 3 to 5 year plan put together. We'll also be doing some additional updates to the comprehensive plan contents related to climate change and resiliency, as well as land use related not only to open space and forests, but also dealing with wildfire risk. We will also be looking at an urban heat resilience strategy. One of the data points that was collected in 2024 were on the hottest day in August of that year, we had volunteers drive around the city, morning, afternoon, and night, to identify where were the hottest points of the city. And probably not a surprise to people, but where there was a lower tree canopy, the temperatures were higher. And so now we have data that actually verifies that. And then again, the planting plans that I mentioned, those will be things that are developed over the next 18 months or so. The last piece of what's required right now that we know about for this program is in 27 through mid-2029. And this is going to be focused on transportation. So it will be more of a technical approach, and there may be additional grant funding that there will be, that we'll be accessing for this. And then also potentially taking advantage of some of the prior to this time period information that the city is gathering on its transportation system, both motorized, meaning vehicles, and non-motorized, so feet and bicycles and electric bikes and anything you can think of other than a car or a truck. And then we're also in the middle, actually right now, you're going to have it in front of you in a few months, updating the city's Americans with Disabilities Act transition plan. So that will be part of what we need to do by 2029 to get that process finished. The other piece that's required through state law is an electrical vehicle infrastructure plan. As you may know, there's not a lot of places where electric vehicles can plug in Lakewood at this point. And so it's a matter of trying to figure out where and again, how we can partner with various either public or private property owners to have adequate charging stations for the various amounts that are anticipated over time. Next steps are now going to reflect what was discussed with the City Council last week on the 12th. There was a discussion about whether or not to proceed with an ad hoc group or a more permanent group to be the advisory board for the NEC program. And the direction that was provided by City Council back to the department was to actually look at creating a standing advisory board. And this would perhaps end up dealing with more than just this 5-year or this 10-year plan. That will be the first steps, but also just as a standing permanent board, similar to yourselves, similar to the safety board, the youth council, others that interact regularly with the City Council. So we are now internally working on this direction provided to us, And we will be in front of the city council probably within the next few months to get their reaction to what's recommended. And then I will again bring you up to speed on what's being proposed and directed by council. So that is where we're at right now with this program. I'm happy to say that, again, we were able to expand what we can do over the next 18 months because of this additional grant funding that became available unexpectedly. And so we're going to be able to move that much faster, particularly on the urban forestry program. And that is
Mr.
it,
Larson.
Mr. Chair.
2 points. The first is to the Citizens Advisory Group, which we had for 10 years. It was called the CAG, Citizens Advisory Group. And it served a valid and valuable purpose, but was disbanded for the reasons I don't know. But it's very interesting to me to see it come back to the fore as something that's valuable to the city. Secondly, as most know, I'm concerned about this tree ordinance that we have and that it's overreaching in its extent. But I do really think that when we have replacement trees due to development, that when they can go to the places where we need trees for better temperature control in the city. And that means more comfortable for the people in the summertime and such. So we could, if we have a forested area that's taken apart for homes, that the equivalent of that forest gets created again, at least part of it, to the areas that are not, or that are without trees. And part of that would include what would be an expense to the city, unfortunately, but it's an expense of planting trees in the right-of-way, like we have down Lakeview Avenue, for instance. And that would be really, really a good part of a revised tree program that doesn't have a 40% requirement per se, and that makes sense out of what to do rather than have some artificial number created. That's to say that we've temporarily planned that for the March meeting. That's something that I should still be able to be prepared for. But the presentation reminds me of those points. Thank you.
Commissioner Estrada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Spear, regarding the electric vehicle infrastructure plan, 2 questions. Do we receive any funding via from federal state to us for our plan, number 1? And number 2, with the de-emphasis, and if we do, with the de-emphasis by the federal government on electric vehicles and more toward oil, how will that impact us?
And I do not have a clear answer for you because it is a moving target. I will say right now that the state is providing funding for this planning process through 2029, assuming that in 2027, when they are looking at the state level budget, the dollars are still there to provide it to local governments. If the funding is not there, the requirement to do the planning goes away because our requirement as a city to do it is contingent on state funding to help us do it. The changing federal priorities regarding different transportation modes, I don't think anyone can predict at any point right now what's going to happen in the end. The way that federal transportation dollars are being distributed through grant processes or other programs is changing and is in flux. And what can be the reasons behind the application for a particular project has changed as well. So again, right now, the funding is there, and the assumption is it will continue through 2029 to do this planning. When we get to the point, assuming that planning is done, so beyond mid-2029, and we're trying to implement the electrical vehicle charging station installation, for instance, and then also maintenance over time, the question of where the funding will come from Whether it's federal, state, or if somehow the city is supposed to try to identify those funds, that is all up to debate. So I can't give you a better answer than that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Combs.
Real quick, and not to beat a dead horse, but we're gonna do it anyways. Mr. Larson mentioned the passion for the urban forestry. And just to give the other commissioners some backdrop on this, because you weren't here when it was approved. There was a whole group dedicated for putting together recommendations for the planning commission. And they included mostly activists and arborists. And that group put together recommendations. We got the recommendations, we listened through the whole thing, and that group also gave the city council the same recommendation. So we took that information, then we also poured through hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents to try and understand what an urban forestry program looks like, how it works, what should happen, what were the right targets, what were the wrong targets, what was really achievable, and so on. And at that time, this commission did not believe we could meet the goal that's set. Knew that there was a goal that needed to be established, but we had approved the lower target. I think it was close to 30, 32.
It was 30%.
And part of that had to do with available land. There's only so much land left to build on and to do this with. We have conflicting interests as well. We have a housing shortage. We have housing goals we have to meet. We have infrastructure and all, whether that's roads, sidewalks, or utilities. So there's a lot of things you have to plan in here and still try and get the economic engine of the city going and maintaining that. And I think there is a way to create synergy, but ultimately we recommended a lower target and the city council came back and said, we're going to do a higher target. And there isn't, and there was no evidence and there's no amount of land available that even got us that target. If you were to try and do that, there was no plan at that time that showed there was a pathway to get to 40%. So it was considered a lofty goal at the time, but the idea was from them and help at the time with the city, let's have a goal. But I think what happens over time is that that's forgotten. And the goal of it was just to help push it. But it's not actually achievable. There is no pathway forward to it. We don't own, there's lakes, there's Joint Base Lewis McChord, there's a lot of unbuildable land, there's already existing buildings. So ultimately you'd have to take buildings down or take private property in order to hit that 40%. So just keep that in the back of your head moving forward. I do agree with this objective to try and put more trees in, and certain types of trees can help the environment a little bit more. But there's also a misnomer that trees will solve the problem, and unfortunately trees also create the carbon. So they capture it, and as they degrade, it goes back in. So it is a cycle of life. That is just how they work. So they are not the solution, but they can help. And they definitely can help with cooling and canopy, but it's trying to figure out where that balance is. And I think Mr. Larson's just trying to help remind everybody that it is not a program that it can carry away on its own if it is allowed. And so I think it's something to consider. I don't want to get on the a soapbox on this. I just feel like having the background for this very helpful to understanding how we got in this situation in the first place. And there was an advocacy group that going around the cities and essentially pressuring them into it. Cities had to fight back. Some of these cities who did adopt it were sued, and there's a lot of questions about how much is too much. So I think as a city, I don't want the city to be exposed. I also want a sensible policy that can be easily implemented. And the last one, the program itself was initially gonna be very expensive, and it was around $500,000 to launch it. And I don't know what that number looks like today for continuing to operate and grow it, but we're talking about multiple staff, people involved, and of all the priorities we have, I guess I would just ask that we keep that perspective in mind. And again, I'm not against the idea or even having some goal, but just the background of that might be helpful as we, make steps forward, because got to balance the budget. We've got to work on other things in the city besides trees, and some of these properties are too small to put trees in, yet they'll be forced to, and then their driveways, their sewer system, their infrastructure, their house foundation, those get damaged over time. None of that stuff is factored into the whole plan right now. It was contemplated early on, but it's not factored into the current design. So just, it's something that's worth re-looking at, and how do we create a sustainable program? Right now, we don't have anything going, but I think that's just something to keep in the back of our heads, how do we fine tune this is.
Thank you, Commissioner Combs. Mr. Larson.
The last number I heard was 685 for the cost, 685,000
$685,000 to implement, or just to get started?
to implement the ordinance. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I have talked to some people who have property, and there is an interest in putting trees on those property, and if there could be some incentives that would be small, they would be very willing to assist. And these are big pieces of property from people who feel that it's important and would want to better the city. So I think that one way to do this would be to encourage volunteer programs. Perhaps we would, I've mentioned this before, provide water at a discount, because that's an expensive part of it. The trees are easy to get. Those you can grow them around. I grow tons of trees. They're easy to grow here. But providing those types of things to people who didn't have them would be a way to, I think, that we could harness a lot of people who are interested in it at a lesser cost to the city, and that would be amenable to what we need to do. And as far as the thing about for people in areas that are hot and in lower income, I think that's a really good point that we need to look at, providing them with trees that are going to work well. Some of the trees we've used so far grow up quickly, but they don't really provide the cooling and shade. So clearly there are some clever things we can do that are not as expensive, I think, that we really need to consider. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anybody else? Ms. Spear, I do have one question.
Sure.
Unrelated to the current topic, but as I went to my first meeting of the day, I went to turn down 112th Street, and it is closed as of, I guess, today. Widely publicized. I think everybody knew it was coming. If I had a tally book that I carried around with me on the number one question I've been asked in the last 2 weeks, it would be this. And I will preface all this by saying I understand that the Transportation Improvement Plan, the 6-year plan, is approved by the City Council, and it is subject to funding from various sources. What, and Ms. Silva, this may be a better question for you, what, if any, deconfliction happens prior to the execution of contracts, and who ultimately decides the timeline on beginning work?
It's a great question, Mr. Chair. On the last question you asked about the timing and sequencing, so some of the conversation last night at the City Council was, why is this project going on at 112th and all this over here and it's over here? Specifically, what our capital projects manager, Troy Podswitsky, shared last night with City Council and members of the public is oftentimes those timelines are not dictated. So we have over $30 million worth of sound transit projects we are contractedly obligated to implement and complete by, I think it was 2030 or 2034 was the number thrown out there. And the reason why one project was moving at this pace at this time and moving forward is because we have several other projects to deliver within that timeline. And the reason why those timelines are set, because it's also Sound Transit has other improvements they are contractually obligated and will be leading. So there's a sequence of events and different projects, different roadway segments, sidewalk segments get done in a sequence that make the most logical and less complicating for the traveling public as best as possible. As we all know, and including myself, I hate being in traffic. I get frustrated like anybody else. But if we want to see the improvements, we have to all work together and also work on our patience as well. And I'm talking to myself when I'm driving and sit in traffic for hours. So it's often nuances like that that really dictate. And can you repeat your first question, sir?
I think the first part was just, is there consideration given to timelines, execution timelines, and then where that responsibility lies to make that decision?
Yeah, so part of that, some of the sequencing projects you see in the 6-year tip, again, Sound Trends and what they are doing versus what we have to do within a certain time frame are a big indicator in that. Another big indicator is the source of funds, because the source of funds, whether it's a federal grant or a state grant, there is a duration in which we need to not only design, permit, and construct, and do final closeout with that granting agency within a few years of that. So oftentimes it takes us about 4 to 6 years from start to finish. We're trying to do many of these projects because of available funding that we have secured in 3 years, 4 years, even less than that. So while we're trying to move forward critical infrastructure improvements, sometimes you have to bend to the will and agree to the strings attached to that grant agreement.
Thank you for your response. I appreciate it. I realized that there was a conversation held last night, but I think it is important that we ask these questions and that the public hears the staff response and we get them answered.
Yeah, and I know the director was at the last night. This is related to the sequencing of the road projects. And so Sound Transit was one of it. The grant timelines play a huge role. Anything else you want to add, Jeff?
No, that's really it. We have other projects, those 7 other projects that we're looking at. And in order to be able to move forward and be obligated for the funds for that and get those funds, we have to complete this. In order to complete them all in the timeline that we have, it must go now. It's unfortunate that there's the overlap in what we're looking at, and that was unintentional. That was not the intent or the purpose. But in redoing Nyanza and looking at how we did design it and some of the water upgrades that were done at the same time, there were a multitude of factors that really led to these overlapping like they are. But honestly, I know it's unfortunate at this point we are where we are. And if we don't move forward, then we risk losing more than this inconvenience really would cause.
Thank you. Mr. Larson.
Another point that was made earlier by the city engineer, and that is that this funding expires. So if they don't get the stuff done within the funding, the outside funding goes to the Lakewood taxpayers. So we want to do it, got to do it now.
Get it done. Mr. Estrada.
Just to piggyback, so last night we also heard from one of the council members who said when the roundabout there on Gravelly and Nyanza is completed, which should be in a couple of months, that would alleviate a lot of the problems because there'll be two-way flow of traffic. Whereas right now it's backed up because of the single lane and light. Is that correct?
Yes, so prior to Nyanza opening, 2-way traffic on Gravelly at that roundabout will go into service. And then Nyanza will open up, I don't remember the time frame. I apologize, but it will go into 2-way traffic on Gravelly prior to that opening to the full roundabout.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Any other questions?
Yeah, not a comment, just maybe a request. Yeah, I totally get why. That's just the nature of the funds. And we are kind of, handcuffed sometimes. I think one thing that would be helpful is, as soon as we know when this is going to happen, try and get that blast out as much as often, because it's the one I hear most about as well. And so I totally get it. Your reasoning is fine. It's just not everyone knows it, so they just get upset,
Dan, 100%, and we'll do a better job on trying to forecast those. On this one, specifically as to where we're at, this is something that we spoke to at the timing and when these projects were set to go through. We do that when we're doing part of the TIP and where these things are going to be. What we didn't broadcast was the slide to the right that occurred with Nyanza that then left them in overlap, right? So that was something that developed as we were going through construction, and we could have been a little more conversation about it, but I think it honestly would have been like, this is coming, winter is coming type scenario. Yeah. Thank you.
Anything else? No? Ms. Spear?
All right, it looks like Councilmember Talbot actually is here, who is the new Planning Commission liaison from the City Council. So I'll invite her up if she has anything she'd like to share.
And Mr. Chair, can I ask a question of her?
Please, real quick.
Okay, excuse me, no, Ms. Talbot, Ms. Talbot, could you please address the concern by Councilman Lasarella regarding the MF3 versus MS3 parentheses 1,
With regard to the alcohol.
the alcohol,
sales?
the
Yeah.
discussion last night regarding the alcohol, which we submitted forward.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, Planning Commission. Welcome to our new members. It's nice to see you all again. Nice to be here. Wednesday nights have not changed, so. But yes, thank you for your discussion earlier, which I heard some of. Last night, we did have some discussion about the recent alcohol permitted areas for breweries and whatnot. I think it was a pretty good discussion. And a couple of the things that came up were, you know, the question of number one, should we expand allowance of those uses into the MF3 area? There's MF3 1 and MF3 just regular, non-parenthesis. And I think the logic was that, you know, hey, should we just expand it to make it consistent across the zone? So that's one thought of that concept that is out there that we've asked staff to go back and bring us some information about when we hear the item again in February. The other thought, the other idea that came up and comment that came up is also meritable too, that like, hey, you know, we need to, we should be a little more cognizant of how we're placing these uses so that we're not just shoving them in one type of residential area. I know that the Planning Commission talked about, you know, in the Station District, the idea of we can allow for ground floor retail use in that very high density area. So it makes sense on one hand to invite those type of commercial uses, but the only other area where we have that type of densification is the apartment areas behind Oakbrook, behind the Oakbrook Shopping Center, the Thunderbird Shopping Center. Most of that area is primarily built out, so the density that you see today is the density that exists, and that would be, you know, the concept that we could allow breweries in those existing areas where you see apartments today. Does that really, you know, should that, or does that really make sense? That's kind of, I think that's going to be the point of discussion for us to discuss when we hear this item in February. But to Mr. Estrada's point that yes, there is the other thought that, you know, multifamily is really is a use and a type that, you know, we're trying to make it easier for families in general. And so, you know, shoving these types of uses there, is it really compatible? When you know, one of the things I also look at too is in that Oakbrook area, for example, it's also surrounded by neighborhood commercial use. And so those are, and commercial use. And those are also uses that are probably more suitable to attract a type of alcohol uses that we're allowing. So in a way, I would say that they kind of, you know, they kind of are permitted in those areas, but there will be some more discussion in February. So I'll just keep it there. I hope that that kind of gets to what you were, Mr. Estrada, what you were kind of hearing last night.
Yes, we decided to do that. We decided to allow it in the station region, but that's it for MF3. So we made it a separate little category all by itself, you know? So the point last night was, no, if you're gonna do MF3, make it all the way across, not just a separate little section. But to her point, we want growth in the station area. Does that help growth? Probably, maybe so. That was our idea in the first place. But we don't have any growth in Oak Brook. And so that was maybe our thought at the time. I don't remember the discussion, to tell you the truth.
I think I would maybe just close up my comments here that just to summarize that, yes, that was one of the points. That was another discussion. Coming up, we also, you may have seen there in the minutes, but we have assigned council members to their respective committees. So, so I will be with you some more for a while, you know, for going forward. So I appreciate that. And it also looks like we may have some upcoming appointments throughout the whole committee stretch this year. There are other committees that are up for that have terms ending. So, you know, it's a good time to, it's always good to recruit and think of people to bring on to engage and, you know, be part of our parks committee, our safety committee, and whatnot down the line. So I'll close there and I can answer any questions.
Sure.
Commissioner Estrada.
And I'm sorry for hogging up the
No,
time. So last night also, one of the council members brought up cannabis. The use of the establishment of cannabis establishments, sales.
I can comment.
Had been discussed before. Now, do you think that that's going to come before us? Like the alcohol was?
I
did?
don't know, but I would, I don't know. I will defer to staff, but what came up last night at least was just the question and the comment that, hey, we're hearing about it more, or it's the legalization has been around for quite some time. The industry has been around for quite some time in the state, and some of us hear about it more often than others. And so perhaps it's time to do, at least, at the very least, just the due diligence of just seeing some data and evaluating it and look and you know, looking at the data for what we have in front of us, coupled with data also indicating, giving us a sense of the impact of legalization. And that is, you know, however you track that, that data can take some time to collect. So I don't think that this issue will be coming soon necessarily, but we have asked, council is asking to at least start to get some sense of this issue, I would say this year.
And Mr. Chair, if it were something where the council wanted to consider the legalization of cannabis, our current code prohibits it explicitly. It would come before you as a code change, but it'll be a period of time to do any research requested, and then they would have to direct that action.
Okay, thank you.
So if there is any action taken, you are the body, the planning commission is the body that accepts the public hearing. So you would hold the public, we would look to the planning commission to hold the public hearing for that item.
Thank you. Thank you.
anything else over here? All right. Councilmember Talbot, thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining us. We look forward to seeing your smiling face every Wednesday that we meet for the rest of the year. Ms. Spear, anything?
Just a reminder that we are now, the next meeting will be the first Wednesday of February. We're already into February. It'll be February 4th. And then we'll be moving into Discussion of a couple of new items, the annual comprehensive plan amendment package, which is a recurring theme. We're going to have this spring the shoreline restoration plan activity reporting back to you from the city itself, as well as volunteer organizations in the city that do restoration work. There's going to be a conversation, excuse me, regarding the ADA transition plan that I mentioned earlier this evening, and continuing forward with the natural environment and climate change direction once we hear back from council where they specifically want to go with that. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Spears. Any council member, excuse me, commissioner, have anything for the good of the order? Commissioner Larson. Understood. If you can't hear Commissioner Larson's request, we move the conversation date for the tree ordinance. That request was received at our last meeting
Yes.
and is captured in the minutes.
Yes.
So we're good to go there. Any other member have anything for the good of the order, betterment of the group? I'll leave you with this. Recently attended the Lake City Neighborhood Association meeting. Wonderful opportunity to engage with the community where our Planning and Public Works Director, Mr. Jeff Remack, was present, spoke to everybody in attendance. He was posed with some questions and concerns from the community. And to his credit, he left the building and went and addressed those concerns and witnessed them in person that night and responded back to the neighborhood association folks so they could get those responses back to the members. It was very well received. Mr. Remack, thank you so much. I think you've done nothing but demonstrate what true public service looks like. And I just want to say thank you for doing that. That is not in your job description necessarily, but it is noted and very well received. Thank you. That being said, I'll just remind you that our next meeting is February 4th, 2026, and I declare this meeting of the Lakewood Planning Commission